British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's political career could have ended 2 weeks ago, but he narrowly survived the vote of no confidence by the Tory MPs in the House of Commons and distracts with the next crises. It's an amazing talent that Boris Johnson has. Barely 2 weeks ago, as I said, the British Prime Minister and his political career was almost over. He narrowly survived the Conservative Tory MPs' vote of no confidence in the House of Commons, with 41% of members of his own party group voting against him. In polls, a large part of the population is calling for his resignation, and he was publicly booed at the Queen's Jubilee celebrations. And yet, Johnson just keeps going. Instead of talking about Partygate and his misconduct during the corona lockdown, the focus is always on new crises. The British call it the dead cat strategy. That's what Nikolai von Ordaza from the Science and Politics Foundation said in an interview with German television. When there's a dead cat on the table, everyone talks about it and not about the scandal that preceded it, he says. And it works. After all, there are at least 2 dead cats on the table this time. Both the renewed escalation with the EU on the Northern Ireland issue and the deportations to Rwanda are a strategy to distract from Partygate. Just a week after the vote of no confidence, Johnson and his government are conjuring up another crisis because last Monday they introduced a bill in the House of Commons that would unilaterally circumvent the Northern Ireland Protocol of the Brexit agreement and would thus probably, or most likely, break international law, for me certainly. A conflict that has been brewing for a long time. It's no surprise to political scientist Anthony Glees that he's boiling up again now of all times. It is Boris Johnson who is fighting for his political survival, said the emeritus professor at Buckingham University in an interview with German television. It was the British Prime Minister himself who signed the Brexit agreement, including the Northern Ireland Protocol. Johnson hailed the 2019 arrangement as a major breakthrough, replacing the backstop proposed by his predecessor Theresa May. The backstop would have envisaged Britain remaining within the single market and customs union to prevent a customs border between the north of the Emerald Isle and Ireland. With the protocol, the kingdom could secede. The customs border is now in the sea between mainland Britain and Northern Ireland. Back then it was said, Northern Ireland stays in the EU single market and thus gets the best of EU membership and remains part of the UK. And that paid off for the region in the north of the Emerald Isle. People are better off economically because they can sell their goods within the EU and also get workers from across the EU. They can't do that in the rest of the UK. And therefore, from an economic point of view, it makes little sense to question this agreement, say a lot of political scientists. So there is a political will behind it. The British government claims it is concerned about the Good Friday Agreement, which will ensure peace in Northern Ireland. And when they say this, it's complete bullshit, by the way. In doing so, they follow the arguments of the Northern Irish Unionist DUP, which opposes unification with Ireland. For weeks, they have been blocking the formation of a government in Belfast and are demanding that Northern Ireland gives up its special Brexit status. The EU has responded to Johnson's bill with infringement proceedings. And political scientists like Ondaatje expect 2 more steps but not the full escalation. Because the draft of the Northern Ireland Protocol had to go, the bill now that wants to lift up the protocol has to go 2 houses of parliament. The British government doesn't have its own majority in the House of Lords, and many Conservative lords are particularly critical of the breach of international law, says the Britain expert. And the EU knows that too. It's unlikely that the bill will get through the UK Parliament before the end of the year. In addition, it is unclear whether Johnson will even survive this year politically. That's why Brussels is reacting with strategic patience, as for example Ondaatje calls it. And as a third step, will try to signal to Northern Ireland that cannot be talked to, unlike the narrative that London often tries to use. And meanwhile, London has been harboring a second conflict with Europe for some time. Not with Brussels this time, but with Strasbourg. On Wednesday, the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, which has nothing to do with the EU, but is an organ of the Council of Europe, stopped the first planned deportation flight to Rwanda. You might have seen my video on that one. The British government had struck a £120 million deal with the African country. The agreement stipulates that people who are deported by Great Britain end up in Rwanda and receive accommodation and an asylum procedure there. The purpose of this deterrent is to prevent smugglers from continuing to steer people across the English Channel in unseaworthy boats, but it has nothing to do with helping those people. Because of the dispute with Strasbourg, some Tory MPs have already threatened to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, which Great Britain helped establish in the 1950s. But that's not particularly likely. It's more like shadow boxing. It's something like the British government is seriously aiming for. It's not. After all, that would jeopardize not only the Brexit deal, but also the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland, as the government has to ensure that part of the island is a member in the Human Rights Convention. In any case, the Rwanda Agreement is controversial. Following the ECHR decision, British courts are now to clarify whether the practice is lawful. But criticism of it now ranges from human rights activists to the British royal family. It's really hideous, says Glees. The British government has criminalized the search for asylum, and in the end, Rwanda decides what happens to the people. The expert sees a policy behind it that is quite typical of Johnson. The Rwanda deportations and the renewed Northern Ireland question are a radicalization of British politics. Johnson is trying to stay in power with new crises. Anything that divides people and divides their opinions is important to Johnson. Rwanda's deportations met with approval from around 35% of voters, and if you take a closer look, the people who voted for Brexit and the people who voted for the Tories in 2019 are in that 35%. Johnson's party, on the other hand, is less critical. Rwanda's policy is supported by most of the Conservative Party, including some who just supported the no-confidence vote against Johnson. It also helps that the Labour Party is struggling to find its own position on the Rwanda deportations and also the Northern Ireland issue, because an important part of their electorate advocates tougher rules against illegal migration. In addition, it's difficult for the former Remain party, which no longer wants to question Brexit, to position itself on the Northern Ireland issue. That leaves only the Conservative Party, which could topple Johnson. But there's currently no clear successor, and for many, Johnson is the one who pushed through Brexit. That's, from their point of view, a great achievement, especially for Conservative voters. And they could win elections with him. But now the constant scandals cost approval. Because of his misconduct and the lack of credibility, he's much more controversial in the party and also at the grassroots level. However, around 60% of MPs and Conservative voters still support him. So, Johnson's failure is only a matter of time, maybe, but if political scientist Glees has his way, it could be ready in the next few weeks. Then there are by-elections in 2 regions. Bankruptcies are looming for the Conservatives there. Political scientist von Odaza is a little more reserved in this. He says, in my estimation, Johnson is very likely to survive the by-election. In October, there's then the big party conference of the Conservative Party. By then, however, there must be a significant change in mood within his own faction. In addition, the next scandals are already emerging. A few days ago, the British government's ethics advisor, Christopher Geet, whose resignation has since been published by Downing Street, resigned. You might have seen my video on that one too. In addition, there's the cost of living crisis, the cost of living are rising sharply in Great Britain and more than the rest of Europe. And a committee of inquiry is in the process of clarifying whether the British Prime Minister lied to Parliament during party date. If Johnson falls over anything, it's a combination of those events, but not just one, because he always showed that he's kind of a Teflon Prime Minister. But the by-elections will be very interesting, and the party conference as well. But Boris Johnson has no serious challenges at the moment. To be honest, who wants to take over the job in times like this? But he knows how to distract. That's why he went to Kiev again. I'm quite sure in a lot of newspapers there is the topic of Boris going to Kiev, Boris promising long-term aid for the Ukraine instead of all the things he's messed up. But I will keep reminding you. And by the way, you might hear it in my voice still. I'm still haven't died from my man flu, but who knows. But maybe I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.